ॐ ज्ञानं तिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकय चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददति स्वापदन्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपां साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादां सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तु ते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुस्तुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Okay, so today we are on chapter 5. Can anyone say what we did in chapter 4? Yes, Divya Bhakti Mataji.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. We talked about that there was no prerequisite for devotional service other than attraction and a desire to please Krishna. And a pure devotional service is free from from desire for liberation and sense gratification.
Yes, thank you. Bhukti and Mukti, right? So
Yes.
it's free from the desires for Bhukti and Mukti. And we talked about the purity of devotional service, how nothing else is required for devotional service. So nothing is needed to be eligible to practice devotional service other than the desire to perform devotional service. And devotional service, pure devotional service, means not having any other desire other than serving Krishna. Right? So it's called the purity of devotional service. And nothing is required for devotional service, and devotional service means nothing else, no other desire than serving Krishna. And in that context, we read about Gajendra and Bali Maharaj and Indra and all these various examples that Rupa Goswami brought from the Bhagavatam that were so inspiring. So chapters 3 and 4 explain and illustrate the eligibility for practicing pure devotional service. It is not very stringent. One must simply have an attraction to serving the Lord without selfish motive. And I think in the last chapter, the focus was the without selfish motive, how the devotees are selfless. So we have an attraction to serving Krishna, but no cheating religion, not for selfish motive. Anyone want to add something to that? Okay. A lenient requirement is unique to bhakti. Generally, to practice self-realization, one must have a great deal of preliminary qualification, such as pious birth, purification through prayaschitta rituals, executing varnashram dharma. Chapter 5 explains that bhakti is not dependent upon any of those three prerequisites. It is independent and self-sufficient. So bhakti is not dependent on any uh, uh, of these three prerequisites. Pious birth, which is very important. You see in the in certain sampradayas, even in Vaishnava sampradayas, like in the Madhva Vaishnava sampradaya, being born in the Madhva family and tradition, in one sect of the Madhva Vaishnava sampradaya, is very important. In fact, they will not even preach to people outside of that community. Because they say if Krishna wanted them to practice this, Krishna would have had them be born in this community. Purification, in the Advaita tradition, only a sannyasi can speak. Only a sannyasi can preach. You must be a sannyasi to be to actually practice the tradition properly. But it's only in the path of bhakti that grihastas, householders, they are allowed or inspired to um, to practice devotional service. This is actually a point that Prabhupada makes, that householders, people who are married, anyone other than pure celibates, brahmacharis or sannyasis, are encouraged in the practice of bhakti. All other processes, one needs complete vairagya, complete renunciation before they can practice that spiritual path. Generally, to practice self-realization, one must have a great deal of preliminary qualification, such as pious birth, purification through Vedic rituals, and following varnashram dharma. Bhakti is not dependent upon any of the above three prerequisites. Devotional service is the constitutional position of the living entity. Therefore, both the processes of bhakti and eligibility for bhakti are independent of considerations of birth, caste, community, and other processes. Essence of this chapter. So what is this chapter now? Okay, sorry, 1 second. Yes. So one other point that Rupa Goswami makes, and I was going to make this point here, is that bhakti is independent of caste, community, and other processes. And that's why in later chapters he makes that's why to identify a devotee based on their caste and community and race, etc., is one of the greatest offenses to the holy name. So to offend a devotee is the first offense to the holy name, but especially to offend a devotee based on his low birth, what we consider to be low birth, or what someone may consider to be a low birth, that is a very great offense. Because not only are we offending the devotee, but we're doing it simply on the basis of an external, his varna ashram, right? He's born in a Shudra family or not Kshatriya family. So, or, black or white or, Bengali or South Indian or, and sometimes we may think, oh, well, this is not our philosophy in ISKCON. And so we don't do this. But sometimes, inadvertently even, we come in this mindset and we see bhakti and the practitioners of bhakti in terms of their caste and community, right? Inadvertently, I start to think of devotees in terms of South Indian, North Indian, Indian or American or black or white. And that is an offense against the holy name. That's not the process of bhakti. And we have to be very careful, right? Even in my own mind, like sometimes you think, oh, okay, this is this type of devotee, so they will be interested in this, or they are easy to work with. But it's a very wrong mindset because in every caste and community, you'll find great devotees of the Lord. Like Bali Maharaj is born in a demoniac community, but he's a pure devotee of the Lord. And in every community, you'll find some people who are averse to the Lord. So bhakti itself is independent of caste and community. What is the essence of this chapter? What are not qualifications for taking up devotional service? So until now, we saw what is the qualification to practice devotional service, which was attraction to performing devotional service. And now we're looking at what are not qualifications. To further emphasize it, Rupa Goswami is now making the point that these things, you may think that they qualify you to being a great devotee, to being a devotee, but these are not qualifications. This is not the reason why I or you or any one of us are devotees, and we should not make it into a qualification for taking up devotional service. So as we always see, Rupa Goswami will always quote from the scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam 126. Devotional service has no material cause, and therefore it cannot be checked by any material circumstances. It is open for all, without any distinction, and it is the constitutional occupation of the living entities. Bhakti yoga is very powerful. One need not wait for a pious birth before he can begin and perfect pure devotional service. On the contrary, by practicing devotional service, one becomes pious. So, bhakti makes us pious. Not that we must be pious before we are a devotee. Because every child is born crying, right? Every child is born in some ways, except for the very exceptional devotees, they're all born in ignorance. So, how can we be proud of our birth, our pious birth? So, bhakti is independence from the necessity of pious birth. One time, some disciples of Srila Prabhupada said that to Srila Prabhupada, what was our good fortune that we were able to meet you and serve you? And Srila Prabhupada said, I made your good fortune. You were, because they were thinking, well, we must have been we must have done something pious in our last life that we were able to meet Prabhupada and something, but they were feeling that it's not us, right? So then they were kind of clarifying to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, I made your good fortune. So devotional service is what makes us pious. So example of the independence from birth, a class of priestly persons claim to be the descendants of Nityananda, calling themselves the Goswami caste. They further claimed that the practice and spreading of devotional service belonged only to their particular class, which was known as Nityananda Vangsha. In this way, they exercised their artificial power for some time, until Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the powerful Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, completely smashed their idea. There was a great hard struggle for some time, but it has turned out successfully, and it is now correctly and practically established that devotional service is not restricted to a particular class of men. So even being a descendant or a family member of Lord Nityananda does not make us the de facto leaders of a movement or de facto devotees. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur smashed that idea and said, no, Bhakti is simply based on pure devotional service. It's not restricted to any class of men. And no one has the birthright of spreading Krishna consciousness as opposed to anyone else. You see, actually, like Srila Prabhupada, he after during his departure, after his departure, he assigned the responsibility of his movement. He particularly named 11 people or 12 people, I can't remember, to carry on the movement, right? That I mean, to be the next initiating gurus and GBCs. He had faith in these people, he made them. And many of them, most of them, did not survive. They did not stay in Krishna consciousness even. A few of them thrived, like His Holiness Tamak Krishna Maharaj, others. But most of them didn't even stay in the movement. And Prabhupada particularly named them. He put it down on paper. He lists them. Why? Because that was the mindset. They started thinking that then the zonal acharya system started, where they started thinking that this is my area. I am the acharya for this area. And Prabhupada said very clearly that no, this is based on your preaching. People will get attracted to your preaching, and then you will guide them. And he gave them the responsibility for preaching and for managing the schedule, managing the movement. But when they started thinking that I am the acharya, I am the next one for this area, but I'm the next one, based on the fact that I have I have, you know, a tag, so to say, then it didn't work because uh, because bhakti is simply based upon bhakti. Bhakti is not based upon a material consideration that I am I am the chosen one, that I am, born of a certain family, or I come from a certain lineage. Bhakti is always based upon inspiration and empowerment. We see that theme throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the devotees are empowered by the strength of their bhakti, by the strength of their preaching and their service. It's not restricted to a particular class of men. Also, they started thinking that they are the only ones to further Prabhupada's movement, right? So it's not restricted. Yes, they were given the responsibility, but then others were also given. And so to add a restriction to devotional service is also part of the material mindset, which bhakti is beyond. Srila Prabhupada's mission: anyone can now become a Gaudiya Vaishnava from any part of the world or any part of the universe. Anyone who is a pure Vaishnava is situated transcendentally, and therefore the highest qualification in the material world, namely to be in the mode of goodness, has already been achieved by such a person. Our Krishna consciousness movement in the Western world is based on the above-mentioned proposition of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, our spiritual master. So this mindset started with Rupa Goswami and went through Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whose very mission of life was he was fighting against the caste Goswamis, essentially taking our tradition away from their hands and putting it in the hands of the true Vaishnavas. The caste Goswamis were claiming ownership, that that bhakti is limited to the Brahmanas, bhakti is limited to people from India, bhakti is limited to to the vegetarians. Bhakti is limited for this part of the world, and don't cross the ocean and go to the other part of the world. But his very contribution, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master's contribution, was that no, Krishna consciousness is for every part of the universe. And that's why when Srila Prabhupada meets Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it's the very first instruction, the very first mood. Srila Prabhupada has joined Gandhi's nonviolence movement. And he says, first, does an India need independence before anyone will hear our message? Shouldn't I first fight for Gandhi, and then after that I will join you? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that this mission cannot wait for anyone's independence, any country's independence. This mission belongs to the whole universe. Just spread this mission. Don't worry about India's independence. And then Prabhupada gives up his allegiance to, well, he gives up his service there in the Gandhi's movement and he joins Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur full time. So this is even before starting the Western movement, so to say, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had the vision, had the philosophy that this is not going to be based on India's independence, or it's meant for the whole world. Padma Puran. Every highborn or lowborn can take a cold early morning bath in Magha, the winter month. The only qualification for such a cold bath is that one wants it. Similarly, anyone can take to bhakti if they have attraction to it. So, so why does anyone take a cold bath? One takes a cold bath only because one wants to take a cold bath. There's nothing that forces one to take a cold bath. Similarly, anyone can practice bhakti if they want to practice bhakti, because bhakti takes effort and time. So one will do it only if they want to, and that is the key thing. In the Skanda Puran, it is also said. So he's quoting from all the scriptures, Rupa Goswami, just to show and drive in this point so powerfully. People of impious birth who began to follow Vaishnava Dharma became even more purified than the highest born brahmanas. Right? So this is described in the Skanda Puran. And we see this in the Krishna book also, right? The wives of the brahmanas become even more pious than the brahmanas. They're even more exalted than the brahmanas, though according to Vedic dharma, the men are generally more spiritually, you could say, eligible. Being men, they're doing the yajnik, all the yagyas and reciting Vedic hymns, which are the words of the Lord. But their wives become even more purified by the strength of their bhakti. So if you follow Vaishnava Dharma, anyone can become fully purified, more than even the Brahmana. And then this is a very important analogy that's given by Rupa Goswami, that's quoted by Prabhupada, and it serves as the basis for Prabhupada's giving Diksha, second initiation, to women. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj is giving to women also. Actually, there's some evidences that this practice didn't just start with Srila Prabhupada. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also made it a point to show the purity and transcendence of bhakti, that second initiation should be given regardless of gender, whereas in other traditions, only men receive it. Just as bell metal attains kanchanata, goldness, similarity to gold, by following the procedures of alchemy. Similarly, by following the procedures of diksha, vijatva, vijanas, similarity to the twice-born individuals is produced for humans. So you can turn bell metal into gold by alchemy. And many, many people have tried doing this, but they haven't been successful, because if you can do that, you'll become a billionaire overnight, right? But they could do that. And even I think Newton was trying to do this, because it was a well-known thing that can be done. But the way to do it, Prabhupada says, he writes very interestingly, is that you have to take bell metal. This is the process. You can try it at home. And you have to urinate on it. When you mix like bell metal with urine, then it turns into gold. Now, the last time I tried it, and I didn't try it actually, but just for discussion's sake, it didn't work. So Prabhupada says, why doesn't work? In one place, because a yogi had to urinate on it. So the urine had to be of a certain quality. You had to be very spiritually elevated. So the yogis had this power. They had the you could say the strength or the qualification to change it, and that's why not everyone could do it. It takes, so to say, mystic powers to do it. Similarly, one can take an ordinary person and turn them into a Brahmana. But not anyone can do it. The spiritual master, the pure devotee of the Lord, they can do it, right? So that's the key thing. By following the procedure of Diksha, Dijatva is produced for humans, right? So what is the procedure? That they take shelter of the spiritual master. He should not think that simply by the acceptance of such initiation, his business is then finished. One still has to follow the rules and regulations very carefully. If after accepting the spiritual master and being initiated, one does not follow the rules and regulations of devotional service, then he is again fallen. So the spiritual master makes us into a Brahmana, a Dvija. Dvijatva, Brahmananess comes in us on account of bhakti. But then we have to maintain it as gold, and we can maintain it as gold if we keep polishing it. So if we don't follow the rules and regulations, that won't remain. It won't stay, and will fall again in material life. Prayashchitam, the process of atonement. Bhakti has independence from rituals of purification. One plagued by sinful reactions cannot steadfastly take to the path of self-realization. One is therefore required to execute certain rituals called prayashchita to eradicate one's karma. So, um, first thing is we have to give up sinful life. And when we give up sinful life, then to give it up, one has to do prayashchita. However, devotional service, however, is not dependent on such rituals. Bhakti is itself the most powerful means to eradicate sinful reactions. There's no need for any other method of purification. So in the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada also talks about this. In the Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj also talk about this in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that what is the use of prayashchita or atonement? When we perform atonement and then again we perform sinful acts and we fall in sinful life again. So we said, right, that the devotee must follow the rules and regulations, meaning avoid sinful activities. One has to give up sinful activities in order to remain steadfast in devotional life. But in order to give up sinful activities, follow the rules and regulations, we don't need the process of prayashchita, Rupa Goswami here is saying. Bhakti itself, the practice of bhakti and the strength of bhakti is itself sufficient to keep us free from the sinful activities. Devotional service is independent of prayashchita. It's the most powerful method. It in fact, so Shukadeva Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj, they're discussing that how atonement does not remove the desire within the heart. It removes the sinful reaction, but it does not remove the desire for sinful life within the heart. But devotional service not only removes the sinful reaction, 1866, but it also removes the desire for sinful acts within the heart. And therefore, bhakti is transcendental or beyond devotional service. Therefore, one need not be pure before taking up devotional service. One becomes purified by taking up devotional service. Therefore, one need not be pure before taking up devotional service. One becomes purified by taking up devotional service. This is something that my Bhakti Shastri teachers told me, that renunciation is not the means of purification. Renunciation is the result of purification. Similarly, purification is the result of devotional service. Devotee's rectification. If by chance a devotee becomes involved in impure activities, he must rectify himself. The process of rectification is that he must again strictly take up his devotional principles. There is no need for any other means of purification. This exemplifies the self-sufficiency of devotional service. It does not depend on any other process, such as jnana or karma. Srimad Bhagavatam says, the only qualification for devotional service is to engage in devotional service as outlined by the acharyas. In order to become qualified for bhakti, one takes to bhakti. It is self-sufficient. And now Rupa Goswami speaks about the relationship between bhakti and varnashram dharma. Some people, in ISKCON, varnashram dharma is a big topic. How do we apply it? What's the role of it in relation to bhakti? So that is described right here in the Nectar devotion. This is why Prabhupada actually mentioned that the Nectar devotion is the law book for the Krishna consciousness movement, because it describes everything. We speculate so much, but everything Rupa Goswami has described here. Prior to embarking on any path of self-realization, one should properly execute his prescribed duties in varnashram dharma. Then he can successfully take to the path of self-realization. This is the general rule, but it does not apply in the case of pure devotional service. Pure devotional service immediately takes one to the platform of surrendering to the Lord as his eternal servant. So the need for gradual elevation to that level by varnashram dharma becomes obsolete. Devotional service independently accomplishes the purification achieved through varnashram dharma. Therefore, quote, even if one does not execute his specific occupational duty, but immediately takes direct shelter of the lotus feet of Hari, Krishna, there will be no fault on his part, and in all circumstances his position is secure. A long list of scriptural quotes to this effect are at the end of the chapter. So, as I mentioned, like in the Advaita Sampradaya, the monistic Sampradaya, one has to go through varnashram dharma, work their up to sannyas, and then only as a sannyasi can they actually practice jnana, the real thing of Advaita philosophy. But in bhakti, one does not have to execute all of his varnashram duties before taking shelter of Krishna. Our philosophy is prapatti, just surrender to Krishna. Just take refuge in Krishna. In any state, in any situation, at any time. And in a moment, like Maharaj Khatvanga, in a moment we can reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no fault. However, why do we still practice varnashram dharma? We will see. We still have a place for it because it can enhance and facilitate the practice of bhakti. It can encourage the practice of bhakti. But in of itself, varnashram dharma is not a requirement for the practice of devotional service. And that is the end of this chapter. So this chapter was actually a short chapter. And I don't mind doing a short class today. Any questions that we'll see right now before we make a decision to go next chapter or not? Let's see if there's any questions or discussion. Yes, Yashoda Vatsala Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam Jai Shila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for the last time. Lot of questions every time
Yes.
whenever you were, bringing the point.
Yes.
So the first question was like, I was having one question for last 1 or 1.5 year. I'm here
Mm.
and I'm not doing anything. But yes, I'm learning, trying to learn from you, and I always see that. Yeah, you changed the name just now, but earlier it was some different name, right? All
Yes.
these.
Yes. Arudha Mataji. That's my mother's name. This is actually her Zoom account, and
Yeah,
I forget to change it sometimes.
yeah. So I heard her name somewhere else in some other group of
Mm.
our in California,
Yeah.
and you know they were praising that one Mataji, that you are like Aridha Mataji, the and she had that Mataji is also raising her two kids so nicely. So, and I was having that question, and then today you took the same point of taking the birth. But
Mm.
Prabhuji, all these things, although they are not the necessary condition,
Mm.
these all these 3 points can enhance, as you rightly said in the. I'm sorry, I don't want to say that word, but as you mentioned. In the last, that it will enhance, so all
Mm.
these things, getting birth in a pious family like
Mm.
you know Mataji and Prabhuji, it definitely gives the opportunity for that soul.
Yes.
And naturally we always say that devotee comes to a devotee's house. Even
Mm.
Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that those who could not do the complete part of it, they again take the birth in devotee's house.
Yes.
So taking birth there is definitely a advantage, maybe, or a plus point for that soul.
Hmm.
I was
So,
just thinking that way. Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
the Krishna says that in the Gita, right? That Arjuna asks, what happens to the unsuccessful yogi? And then Krishna responds that depending on their advancement in spiritual life, they get birth, they get the fortune of having birth in a pious family, an aristocratic family, or a very advanced family of devotees, right? Um, However, while that helps a person's spiritual progress, because obviously, since childhood, you have a foundation to develop your spiritual life on, that by itself doesn't ensure our success in spiritual life. In fact, sometimes a so-called low birth can be more advantageous for spiritual life. Just like we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the example of Narad Muni. Where Narad Muni is born as a Shudra, in a Shudra family, of a son of a maidservant, where he doesn't even know who his father is. She was a maidservant. It seems like maybe his father died, or maybe someone took advantage of his mother, and she was just a maidservant, and he was born from a father that didn't stay with his mother, or something like that. He didn't have a high birth. He was born of a Shudra family. However, it specially mentions in the Bhagavatam that because I was used to, and his mother used to serving, right? She was a maid servant. Their nature, their servants was to serve. I applied that nature to serving the sadhus who visited the ashram. And because that my nature was simple, I was not proud because, I couldn't be proud of my lineage. I didn't even know who my father is. And therefore, I very humbly and respectfully served the sadhus. And I sat down, and by serving them, he says, I developed the taste to hear from them. And then when I heard from them and served them, then love for Krishna developed in my heart. So commentators, the acharyas mentioned that how his being a Shudra was more compatible with bhakti than if he was an intellectual or a great Brahmana or something like that. Because bhakti is a life of service. And being a Shudra can actually be better because you're used to doing service. So we think, oh, Brahmana is better because, yeah, in one way it's better, but not necessarily. So, um, so the point being, that's the purity of pure devotional service, that in any situation, one can become the greatest devotee. Yes, um, it's unlikely that a person, like if they're born in a family where, they're just, let's say, workers, and no spiritual kind of traditions in their family, it's unlikely that they'll become like Narad Muni, right? And that's why it is a fortunate birth to be born in a situation where you're exposed to spiritual life from the very beginning of your life. As being born in a Brahmana family, but even better than that, in a family of Vaishnavas. And that's why when someone gets that opportunity, it's an even greater, it's an even greater loss if they waste it. It's a greater calamity if those who are in Krishna consciousness, who have the good fortune of having Krishna conscious parents, if they don't, take up their Krishna consciousness and run with it, so to say. So that's why in our movement, there's so much focus now. The first generation, ISKCON was so new, and there was, problems in the Gurukul, this, that. But this generation, the children growing up in Krishna consciousness are having a wonderful experience, right? They're like, as compared to any other youth, even non-devotee youth have sometimes difficult situations or, problems in families or this, that. Everyone has problems. This is a material world. But comparatively speaking, they're having a very nice upbringing. And so the hope is that in this generation, the devotee youth will take forward the movement. And not just the hope, this is the effort that ISKCON leaders are making. They're focusing on youth in every, area almost. Because yes, it's a fortunate birth. They have the Sukriti, they're practicing in past lives, and that's why they're born in this movement, Prabhupada's mercy movement, and they can do very wonderful things. But then they should not think that we are the next ones, right? Because we see that those who come to Krishna consciousness, they are sometimes more spiritually developed and eager. Because sometimes if one is very fortunate, they may be born in a completely materialistic family, but become very serious in spiritual life later on. Like one example, and then I'll end with this response. Like His Holiness Yadunandan Swami, he never got married his whole life. He's like, just like a saintly personality since he joined this movement. He was born in Europe, and his parents would eat meat. He grew up eating meat, all these things, like normal European family. And he says that, like, I think at the age of 12, he saw the devotees. And when he saw them, he knew that this is it. Just past life. No explanation. And he ran away with the devotees. And starting that time, for the rest of his life, he's first was a brahmachari, then he's been a sannyasi, and he manages so many projects in Europe, and he's a traveling sannyasi. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's also mentioned how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sometimes puts great souls in, so to say, karmi families, so that whatever remaining vestiges of desires they have, they experience it. And then when they meet the devotees, then they know this is it, and they give their entire life to Krishna. So someone who's coming from a non-devotee family, we also can't be sure that they're not a second generation devotee. We can't be sure that they haven't been practicing Krishna consciousness since the last 20 lifetimes. In fact, Prabhupada said anyone who's coming to Krishna consciousness must have been practicing for 20 lifetimes, 200 lifetimes at least. So in one sense, all of us coming to this movement are, 100 generation devotees.
Not by chance.
Yes.
So, Prabhuji, for the second point, I'm sorry, I had two questions. That's what I said initially. So, my request was like, is it possible to go to the second last slide? The question was on that, and I thought of not
Sure.
disturbing it at that time.
I will do this.
So, where we are talking about, offenses to the holy name and offenses by, and yeah.
This one?
Yeah, here, kindly. So, devotees rectification. So, by chance, a devotee becomes involved in impure activities, he must rectify himself. The process of rectification is that he must strictly take up the devotional principle.
Mm.
I wanted to, request Prabhuji your guidance on how to, rectify if, we feel like we have done Vaishnava Aparadh, or we are getting some suffering today because of some Vaishnava Aparadh.
Mm.
If you feel that way, and because Krishna is cause of all causes, nothing comes to us
Mm.
just like that. So that is, and naturally, like, it might be somewhere we have, say, I have done something because of which I'm suffering something, maybe. So how to go there with that, like how to rectify, so that I can.
Right. So there's two types of aparadhs. One is knowingly, the other maybe unknowingly or unknown, like you're saying. So if obviously if we have committed an offense, either seva aparadh or Vaishnava aparadh to the Lord, the deity, or the devotees, then we can rectify it by apologizing, right? That's the whole story of Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj, and he goes all the way up to Lord Vishnu, but Lord Vishnu says, no, you have to go back to Ambarish Maharaj, and that's the only way, So if the devotee is there, they're still there in front of us, and in our life, and we can rectify that, then that is the means of rectification. However, I think the part that you are asking is the unknown one. Like, I'm suffering and I don't know what is the thing that I did. And that we see like in the example of Indra in the Bhagavatam, where he offends his spiritual master Brahaspati, and then another devotee, was it a Vishvarupa? He becomes his guru, and he becomes so angry with him, he actually kills his guru. And then when he does that, then he has to, for 1,000 years, he has to perform penance. He cannot leave the Manasa lake, the Bindu Sarovar lake. He takes shelter there. That's the only place that protects him from the sinful reaction. And for 1,000 years, he performs, basically devotional service. He's practicing, he's chanting, so to say. And it takes that long of a time. So sometimes these rectifications and devotees experience this in their life, they take their time, right? We have to go through that suffering. And we think, well, now I've apologized, Krishna, and I'm never going to do it. I'm going to be a nice devotee. But yes, but it's going to take time, right? That rectification process takes time. And until then, we keep struggling and kind of suffering, and which all of us are going through. In some ways, it's a purification. Our original sin being leaving Krishna, right? Our original sin is leaving Krishna. So in some ways, the fact that we're in the material world, we cannot expect that we'll ever have an easy life. Because being in the material world itself is rectification and purification. And if we have an easy life and we're completely happy in devotional service, that means we become a pure devotee. Then we're in the material world, but we're really not in the material world. But until we're in the material world with the material consciousness, there will be suffering. Krishna defines it, dukhalayam ashashvatam. It is the place of suffering. So that rectification will continue until we become pure devotees. Because there's unlimited offenses. The moment we walk into the temple, we're probably doing some offense. And simultaneously, we have to conscientiously, seriously strive to avoid offenses, especially, like you're saying, offenses to devotees, especially offenses to the spiritual master, uh, to the deities, etc., etc.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for this. Yeah.
Thank you. Just like we see, even great devotees are sometimes suffering. So we cannot assume that it's because of an offense, right? This is, as long as we're in the material world, everyone will suffer. Sometimes they suffer to teach us. Sometimes they suffer to take the burden of the sinful activities of their disciples. Sometimes they suffer because it increases their love for Krishna, and it's like a joy for them, And depending on our level of spiritual advancement, also, that suffering comes in different ways and for different reasons. So a devotee, for externally, we can never figure out why they're suffering. that suffering might be the greatest benediction. It might be because they're very advanced devotees, or that suffering might be because they're not advanced and Krishna wants to make them more advanced. Not so advanced, but Krishna wants to make them more advanced. But we cannot know. Sometimes we can know if it's a very great devotee, but we cannot judge. And for ourselves, we feel, Rupa Goswami actually says in the Nectar Devotion, he says that there's two ways that a devotee accepts suffering. Very actually important point. Two ways in a way a devotee accepts Krishna's suffering. He offers obeisances. He literally says this, when he gets suffering, he offers obeisances to the Lord. Because he submits himself to the Lord. That I accept this suffering on my head. It's due to my mistake. I need to purify myself. And secondly, the devotee thinks that the suffering that was due is much more, but I'm getting less. So I was meant to have much more, but because I'm engaged in devotional service, Krishna has reduced the amount and is giving me less. So that's how the devotee accepts it. Okay, Bhadra Krishna Prabhu, I think you're.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, as always, wonderful class. So, Prabhu, I'd like to make one point further to Yashoda Vatsal's question. And as you mentioned, that somebody whose devotional service has not been completed gets a birth in, aristocratic family or a Brahmana family or a devotee family. But there also, as I have heard from many devotees, that it's not necessary that getting a birth in such an aristocrat family or a devotee's family that a person would take up devotional service, because there also your free will come into action.
Mm.
So, then it's up to the individual to use his free will, whether he wants to serve Krishna or he doesn't want to serve Krishna.
Mm.
So getting a birth in an aristocrat family automatically doesn't qualify you that you will take up devotional service,
Mm.
right?
Very.
And the question that I had is, as you mentioned, that the Brahmana Patnis were more elevated or more pure than the Brahmanas, that they could understand what Krishna's desire is. So can we say that even the Nag Patnis were at the same or a similar level, because when Krishna was dancing on Kaliya's hoods, they came and begged for forgiveness. So they knew who Krishna is, and they were asking for forgiveness, that please forgive our husband. He has made mistakes. So can we say that even the Nagpatnis were in a similar position as the Brahmana Patnis?
So the Nagapatnis were definitely more advanced than Kaliya. But on the one hand, Kaliya becomes very, very advanced because Krishna dances on his heads. So, but the good example that they were also very spiritually advanced devotees. They could immediately appreciate Krishna. They could have been angry with Krishna. They could have, tried to attack Krishna. They're also Nagas. They're also great snakes. So in order to protect their husband, they could have, tried to attack him. But rather they start offering prayers to him. So it's actually a theme in the Bhagavatam. It's a good point that you bring up, because it's a theme in the Bhagavatam that the Bhagavatam shows, in fact, more devotees of lower birth than of higher birth in some ways. All the great souls in the Bhagavatam, you see, most of the great souls, they come from non-Brahmana families. Narad Muni, Dhruva Maharaj, he's from a Kshatriya family. Then the wives of the Brahmanas, then the wives of the Nagapatnis, then all the cowherd boys and gopis, they're from Vaishya families. Ajamil, he's from a Brahman family, but he falls, and then he rectifies himself through the strength of bhakti. The kings, they're all Kshatriyas. So Bhagavatam actually, even scholars say, as a text, it's like showing that how like all the other literatures, the Vedic literatures, are for Brahmanas, by Brahmanas, for Brahmanas, but Bhagavatam is one such that that everyone and anyone is practicing bhakti, and in fact, it's highlighting those of lower birth as the greatest devotees of Krishna. So yes, they're yet another example, Nagapatnis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rashmi Mataji.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I just wanted to add to Prabhuji's point that, and this comes in the Narsimha Deva avatar, where once Narsimha Deva kills Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad Maharaj actually asks for mercy, right, to liberate his father. And the Lord actually grants 21 generations or some such number. But it comes up that, so not that every generation will be liberated, but they get the opportunity. And I wonder if that's applicable over here too. So yes, not everyone that's born in a pious or a spiritual family might take to Krishna consciousness, but they do get the opportunity.
So just to recap, you said that in that section, Prahlad Maharaj's section, it says that when it says 21 generations will be liberated, then you're saying somewhere Prabhupada in the purport says that it's not that they're liberated, but they get the opportunity for liberation, 21 generations?
Yes.
Actually, if you can send me that reference, that'll be interesting. I will read it. Because
Sure. Will do.
yes. Because in some places it says that 21 generations are liberated. And if Prabhupada is explaining that this means the opportunity for liberation, then that's very interesting. That's very nice.
So that was, I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Yes.
interrupt you. It was actually Keshav Swami Maharaj's, he had, I can't remember in what, but that was his explanation. That was his detail to that. But I will see if I can pull up if he sent something on that.
Okay. See, all right, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
He was further explaining that the opportunity is provided. Yes, because it may not happen maybe in that specific lifetime, but now they're on the path. Yeah, the opportunity is given. They still have to accept it, right? But I think Krishna makes their life in such a way that they do accept it, because his words also don't go false. If he's saying to Prahlad Maharaj, 21 generations are liberated, that means they are liberated. But then it's a matter of time. Like they have to use their free will to actually accept Krishna, because Krishna consciousness is voluntary always. Because like one great devotee, my spiritual master, he once went to one of his family members, and he was visiting, and he stopped by their home. And like all of his family members, like one could see they were materially exhausted. Like Maharaj's coming was just like everything for them. Krishna had arranged their life in such a way that like literally devotional life was the only turn to take. So they still had to accept it voluntarily, but Krishna made sure that that they received that clear indication and that path forward. So it's probably like like you're saying, it's a balance between the two. um, and Krishna really arranges their life in such a way that they are able to accept bhakti wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Prabhuji. I think that makes more sense, and I guess I missed the subtlety there.
No, but that's you brought in the subtlety actually. So that yes, yeah, because that's actually a nice discussion. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, anything else? All right, so we will stop here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your wonderful, kind attention. Now I'm on break finally. So after today's commencement, and then this week I will be on break. So my hope is to complete grading all the Gita exams, which I'm really behind. So I should have done it before, but now I'll be on break, so I'll get those done. And please continue with your homework. I'll post it on the group, and we will see you next Saturday. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you so
Hare
much,
Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Prabhu.
Prabhu.
Dandavat
Thank you.
pranams.
Thank you. Dandavat pranam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna to everybody.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.